The time for members' statements has concluded. Questions without notice. The Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Prime Minister. Can the Prime Minister confirm that he will not be legislating his own energy policy because he cannot command the support of his own government in this parliament?
The Prime Minister has the call.
Well, thank you, Mr Speaker. Mr Speaker, the government introduces legislation when it knows that it can pass through the House of Representatives. And as I said today, we're not able to be assured of that at this stage. But I want to say this, Mr Speaker. What we have demonstrated is a commitment to bringing electricity prices down. We're bringing electricity prices down. We've started to turn the corner on electricity prices, and today we've announced new measures to picking up from the ACCC report. For example, Mr Speaker, creating a default power bill for households and small businesses, and it's estimated by the ACCC that would save customers on standing offers, and there's over 1 million of those around the nation, between $183 and $416. Now, Mr Speaker, what that is doing is taking the practical steps based on the ACCC report, which we commissioned, to bring down energy prices. And we are prepared to take strong action, to use a big stick to bring the big energy companies to the attention of the public and the customers that they should be serving, just as we did with gas, where we threatened to limit exports of gas, and we resulted in an increase in gas availability on the east coast of Australia and a halving of the wholesale price of gas, and as a consequence a substantial reduction in the cost of generating electricity. We are not afraid of taking on big business on behalf of their customers, and we will do so again. Our commitment is lower electricity prices. We have the measures to do that. They're working. There's more work to do. And the measures we've announced today, the strong measures, will enable us to do more to protect Australian families and businesses and get their power prices down.
Just before I call the member for Robertson, the level of interjections is already too high, and I'm cautioning the members for Rankin, Newcastle and Griffith again, and I'm not going to keep repeating the cautions. I simply will need to take action. The member for Robertson has the call.
Thank you, Mr Speaker, and my question is to the Prime Minister. Will the Prime Minister update the House on the actions the government is taking to reduce cost of living pressures on households, including lower taxes and cheaper energy in my electorate of Robertson? And is the Prime Minister aware of any alternative approaches?
The Prime Minister has the call.
Thank the honourable member.
Members
for
on my
question.
left.
Mr Speaker, we know that many Australian families are doing it tough, and that's why we're doing everything we can to ensure they keep more of the money they earn and we reduce the cost of living pressures on their families. Under our long-term plan for personal income tax relief, lower and middle-income earners will save up to $530 this year and benefit from our plan to deal with bracket creep, which will mean by 2024 94% of Australians will face a top marginal rate of 32.5% on any extra dollar they earn. That's a very big win for hard-working Australians. Now, you'd think, Mr Speaker, the Labor Party would embrace that, but of course they opposed it. They opposed it just like they opposed our multinational tax avoidance legislation. So not only did they not want hard-working Australian families to pay less tax, they weren't prepared to support the government in ensuring that multinationals paid the tax they owed. Now, Mr Speaker, we're seeing strong economic growth and real confidence. It drove over 400,000 new jobs in Australia last year. And, Mr Speaker, that is being supported by our small and medium business tax cuts. Companies with turnovers up to $50 million a year are paying 27.5% tax, They're paying less tax than they were a few years back, and what that means is that they have more money to invest in their business. And, Mr Speaker, the Labor Party opposes that, committed, as we know, to higher taxes for families, higher taxes for businesses, going after the savings of retirees and, of course, with their reckless energy policies, higher energy prices as well. Now, we're backing families with more affordable childcare, we're fully funding the NDIS, and we are able to list life-saving medicines on the PBS because we have a strong economy and the government revenues that flow from that. Now, Mr Speaker, the Leader of the Opposition was telling us today, in a great example of magical thinking, that his 45% emissions reduction target and a 50% renewable energy target, and think about this, the renewable energy target is widely accepted, including by the ACCC's chairman Rod Sims, as being one of the worst energy policies we've seen. Now, it is basically it's been completed, and we are not going to continue subsidising one technology after another, but that's what Labor wants to do, and as Rod Sims said, all that does is lead to higher and higher prices.
The member for Barton is warned. The Leader of the Opposition has the call.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My questions to the Prime Minister. When will the Prime Minister provide Labor with a copy of the legislation for today's version of his energy policy? And will the Prime Minister work with Labor on a constructive bipartisan basis to reduce pollution, increase renewables and deliver lower power prices for Australian families?
Members on both sides, the Prime Minister has the call.
I have to hand it to the Leader of the Opposition. He was able to contain or restrain the smirk until he got halfway through that question. Oh, yes. I would never heard a less convincing advocate for bipartisanship than the Leader of the Opposition. Mr Speaker, he's all politics and no policy. The simple fact is that what we have got are measures that will bring down electricity prices by hundreds of dollars. Strong measures and measures that are working already. All Labor has is a rag bag of measures that have been proved to fail, unsustainable renewable targets, unnecessary renewable targets, unsustainable emissions abatement targets. All of that has demonstrated to put up higher prices and undermine our competitiveness. Now, if Labor was serious about energy policy, they would be supporting policies based on economics and engineering. That's what we're doing, and that is why we're seeing lower prices, and we have more to come.
The Prime Minister's concluded his answers. The Leader of the Opposition seeking to table a document.
No, I was just asking the Prime Minister to table the legislation to which
the Leader of the
he was
Opposition will
referring to.
resume his seat. The Leader of the Opposition will resume his seat. The member for Brisbane.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Treasurer. Will the Treasurer update the House on how implementing the ACCC's recommendations on retail electricity pricing will work to reduce energy prices for Australian households and businesses? Is the Treasurer aware of any alternative suggestions that would drive prices up?
The Treasurer has the call.
Thank you, Mr Speaker, and I thank the member for Brisbane for his question. Three things we're announced to do today. From the March last year inquiry we launched as part of our broader suite of measures to get electricity prices down. In March 2017, we set the work for the ACCC to do, and they've reported back last month. And the three key things we're looking to do now, is a safety net on price for householders and for business, a big stick to keep the big businesses and the energy companies between the lines, Mr Speaker, so those prices do go down, and to back in investment in additional power generation in this country, whether that's coal, whether that's hydro, Mr Speaker, whether it's gas, things that are firmed, things that actually generate more power and get prices down. 1.2 million Australians will benefit from our policy of the safety net price, that default price, which will see power prices fall from between $183 to $416, Mr Speaker. And on top of that, small and medium-sized enterprises will benefit from a fall in price of between $560 and up to $1,500. That's a fall in prices as a result of the policies being pursued by this government that were recommended to us by the ACCC, and we're acting on that report. It'll also simplify the policies and simplify the prices so people know when they're getting a discount, they're getting a fair income discount. And on top of that, by putting in the big stick on the energy companies, from putting the ACCC, the cop on the beat, back to work to ensure that they are doing the right thing. They'll be monitoring their prices again, and that issuance will be going out today. That means that if they fall foul of that, the government, once we're putting those powers in place, will have everything from infringement fines all the way to divestiture, Mr Speaker, if the big companies do not do the right thing. And by backing in investment, we will ensure, by guaranteeing the back end of the finance so those projects can come online, that we will see that additional energy put into the market, Mr Speaker. Now, the Labor Party has a very different view about all this. They want to shut power stations down. They want to put power prices up. They want to put unnecessary subsidies into the market, Mr Speaker, which will only be forced consumers to pay more for these prices, Mr Speaker. They've got a renewable energy target the Shadow Treasurer doesn't even understand, let alone how much it's going to cost, Mr Speaker. And on top of that, they have an emissions reduction target that has only one destination. And it isn't Paris, it's higher prices, Mr Speaker. It's higher prices for every single family. Under Labor, you will pay more. You'll pay more for your electricity, you'll pay more in taxes, and you'll just keep paying more and more and more under Labor.
Just before I call the Deputy Leader of the Opposition, I inform the House that joining us in the gallery this afternoon is a parliamentary delegation of members of the Budget and Financial Affairs Committee of the National Assembly of Vietnam. On behalf of the House, I extend a very warm welcome to you. And I call the Deputy Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Prime Minister. Is legislating the government's energy policy an issue central to government policy? Is it of vital importance?
Prime Minister has the call.
Mr Speaker, what's of vital importance is getting energy prices down. That's what Australians want us to do. I would have thought the Deputy Leader of the Opposition would understand that we need to ensure that the rapid rise in energy prices, way above the rate of inflation, has gone on for too long. We've taken strong measures to bring it down. It's starting to come down, and we have to do more. And so what we are doing is using the recommendations from the ACCC to ensure that we have the tools to make the big retailers, the big energy companies, serve their customers and deliver for them. That's our commitment: cheaper electricity.
The member for Indi.
Thank you, Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Social Services. Minister, this morning I introduced a bill to establish a Social Security Commission to independently recommend adequate levels of social security payments from New Start right across to pensions. Australians want to know that the social safety net is there to catch and look after them as they engage with workforce or further study. It's not a punishment. Minister, will you support the establishment of this commission to ensure people living on government payments have a dignified standard of living?
The Minister for Social Services.
Thanks, Mr Speaker, and I'd like to thank the member for her question. But can I say to her that the government is not going to outsource our welfare system, because it is far, far too important.
The Minister will resume his seat for a second. Minister will resume his seat for a second. The member for Bruce is warned, as are other members interjecting. The Minister has the call.
Because as a nation we should be extremely proud in this place that the top 20% of Australians give more to the bottom 20% than any other OECD in the world. And what that means is, as a government, we have been able to ensure that pensions for couples have gone up by $150. Pensions for singles have gone up by $100. When it comes to the NDIS, we've been able to fully fund it. And when it comes to those of working age, and this is something we should be incredibly proud of on this side, when it comes to those of working age, those on a welfare payment is at a 25-year low at 15%. And that is because of the policies as a government we have been able to put in place. Look at the reforms we've undertaken that we got through the parliament this year. The Welfare Reform Bill, collapsing 7 welfare payments into one. Look at the cashless debit card. And I know all members on this side, especially the member for O'Connor, would have been incredibly interested to see on Friday the press release put out by the Mayor. This is what he said. The cashless welfare card was already proving a success. While the rollout of the federal government's card in the goldfields only started this year, all the indications were positive. As a government, we are going to continue on making sure that we focus on ensuring that the best form of welfare is a job.
The member for Indi.
It was a point of order, but I think the question's rambled to its end.
The member for Page.
Mr Speaker, my question is to the Deputy Prime Minister and the Minister for Infrastructure and Transport. Will the Deputy Prime Minister update the House on how putting downward pressure on power bills and implementing tax cuts for hard-working small businesses help create jobs and confidence in regional Australia, including my electorate of Page? And are there any risks to affordable energy and legislated tax cuts for small businesses helping regional Australia get ahead?
The Deputy Prime Minister.
Thank you, Mr Speaker, and I'd like to thank the member for Page for his question, because he understands in his electorate and in all electorates cost of living is a big factor, and he's working very hard each and every day to make sure that cost of living pressures are addressed. It's the centre of everything that the Liberals and Nationals stand for. That's what we're doing for families, helping with power bills, downward pressure on power prices, a big stick on companies that gouge consumers. We don't want that to happen. The member for Page doesn't want that to happen, and we're making sure that it does not happen. We're going to force companies to have a default offer to make sure that consumers are getting a good deal. For businesses, it's reliable energy, so that you know when you flick the switch, the lights will come on. There won't be hiccups, there won't be blackouts. We'll know that the lights will come on. That's where Snowy Hydro 2.0 is so important. We're building the sort of infrastructure that's going to make sure that when you do flick the switch, the lights come on, the power comes on for families, households and for businesses. And for individuals, it's once-in-a-generation income tax cuts, supported by the member for Page, supported by each and every one of the Liberals and Nationals. For families, for small businesses, it's the lowest tax rate in 78 years, 27.5%, working its way down to 25%, making sure that we give those businesses the confidence that they can invest in themselves, the confidence to know that they can hire that young Australian, or indeed that older Australian. And for farmers, it's also so important in this drought, so important in this drought. $1.8 billion, the total assistance from the federal government. And yesterday, of course, we announced immediate deductibility of fodder and grain storage and payments to local government areas in those drought-stricken communities, plus water infrastructure, construction of piping and troughs and weirs and dams. That's what we're about. But the member for Page, he's got a little business in his electorate called Mid-Richmond Plumbers at Corrocky. It's a family business that started in 1962. It employs 45 staff. It wants to employ more. It also wants to make sure that it has the confidence going forward to make sure that they've got the power prices right. We've got the power prices right, and they'll take advantage of that. The Labor alternative I'm asked about, well, Labor had 6 years to do something about, well, anything. They didn't do much about anything. They didn't certainly do much about income tax cuts. They certainly didn't do much about small and family enterprises. And when it comes to power prices, I have yet to hear the Leader of the Opposition come to the dispatch box, or go anywhere for that matter, and say if he agrees with LEAN, the Labor Environmental Action Network. Who said, oh yes, I get acclamation, high prices are not a market failure, they are proof of the market working well. They are proof. So does the Leader of the Opposition stand for higher power prices, or does he not?
The Deputy Prime Minister's time has concluded. The Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you. My question is to the Prime Minister. The Prime Minister has passionately advocated for three things in his public life: the Republic, climate change and his big business tax cuts. Given the Prime Minister has abandoned the Republic, abandoned action on climate change, will he now rule out abandoning his centrepiece big business tax cuts? Or is it the case that whenever it comes to a choice between his principles and his job, this Prime Minister stands for nothing at all?
Members on my right, the member for Gilmore. The Prime Minister has the call.
The Labor Party stands for higher personal income taxes, higher business and company taxes, opposing multinational tax avoidance, opposing greater childcare support for families, opposing funding the NDIS, wanting to keep secret and corrupting payments between employers and unions, and opposing restoring the rule of law to the construction sector. Mr Speaker, the reality is the Labor Party does not have one policy that will encourage one business to invest $1 or hire one employee. Now, by contrast, what we have done is we've stood up for businesses, and we've seen the strongest jobs growth last year in our country's history, because we're supporting business and we're standing up for hard-working Australian families and giving them a tax break this year and a longer-term reform that will see 94% of Australians relieved from the curse of bracket creep, paying no more than 32.5 cents on any extra dollar they earn. And, Mr Speaker, the honourable member talks about climate change. Well, we're taking real action on climate change. We are. What about the Deputy Prime Minister mentioned Snowy Hydro 2.0? That is the largest pumped hydro project in the Southern Hemisphere. We got it started. We've got it underway. Labor was able to deliver one policy after another that reduced the reliability of electricity networks and increased their cost. We are delivering the largest renewable energy project in Australia's history since Snowy Hydro 1. That's our commitment, committed to a responsible approach to the environment, cheaper electricity prices and a strong economy.
The member for Dunkley.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Minister for the Environment and Energy. Will the Minister update the House on how the government is focusing on lower power bills for households and businesses across Australia, including in my home state of Victoria? Is the Minister aware of any contrary proposals that would increase the burden on Australian families?
The Minister for the Environment and Energy.
Thank you, Mr Speaker, and I thank the member for Dunkley because he is focused on delivering lower power prices for businesses and families throughout his electorate, like Replis and Seafood, who turn plastics into pallets and deck boards, like Sims Metal, like the car yards, like the retail shopping strips across Frankston and across his electorate, Mr Speaker. Now, we won't take lectures from the Labor Party when it comes to energy, because when they were in office, prices went up each and every year, Mr Speaker. They gave us the dreaded carbon tax. They gave us the dreaded Citizens' Assembly. They gave us the dreaded cash for clunkers. What about the green loans? And what about that scheme, the pink bats, Mr Speaker, not to mention Fuel Watch, Grocery Watch? What a mess it was from Labor. No wonder the member for Port Adelaide wrote a book when he said we made mistakes, we sent mixed messages because you drove power prices up, Mr Speaker. In contrast, under the Prime Ministership of the member for Wentworth, Mr Speaker, we have been able to intervene in the gas markets. Prices have come down by up to 50%. We've taken action to rein in the power of the networks, which, if the Labor Party had done it previously, would have saved Australian consumers over $6 billion. We're able to get better deals for 1.8 million households, Mr Speaker. Wholesale prices are down around 25% this year, and retail prices came down in Queensland, South Australia and New South Wales on the 1st of July. And today we've announced the next step in our energy plan, implementing the ACCC's recommendation. And this is what the Australian Chamber of Commerce said about the Prime Minister and the Treasurer and my announcements today. This is a great announcement. This is a good, strong action which will help bring prices down and bring relief to businesses and families. That's from the ACCC, Mr Speaker. What did National Seniors say about the government's announcement today? We welcome this. This is what we've called for. This was based on what our members have told us, Mr Speaker. What they're talking about is a default offer for 1.2 million Australians who no longer will be on the higher price standing offers. We'll see up to a $416 saving, Mr Speaker. Businesses will see up to a $1,457 saving. We'll now have the ACCC as a permanent cop on the beat, monitoring the market and equipped with new enforcement powers to stamp out behaviour. And we'll be implementing Recommendation 4 to get more dispatchable power, new generation, more competition for large commercial and industrial customers. So, Mr Speaker, at the end of the day, the Labor Party will deliver you higher power prices. The Coalition will deliver you lower power prices, more jobs, more investment and a better deal for Australian families and businesses.
The member for Port Adelaide.
Well, thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Prime Minister. Over the past 2 years, the Prime Minister has asked Labor to support an emissions intensity scheme, a clean energy target, the National Energy Guarantee that went to the party room last Tuesday, another version of it announced on Saturday.
The member for Port Adelaide will just pause for a second. The Minister for Urban Infrastructure is loudly interjecting and preventing me hearing the question. He's warned as well. Can you start again? Yeah, we'll just start the clock again.
My pleasure, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Prime Minister. Over the past 2 years, the Prime Minister has asked Labor to support an emissions intensity scheme, a clean energy target, the National Energy Guarantee that went to the party room last Tuesday, another version announced on Saturday, and yet another policy 4 hours ago. Which of these 5 government policies does the government currently support? Aren't Australians paying the price for 5 years of this government focusing on itself instead of policies to bring down power prices for Australian households?
Members on both sides, the Leader of the House, the Prime Minister has the call.
Well, thank you, Mr Speaker. I thank the honourable member for his question. Mr Speaker, the policies that the Labor Party championed when in government were responsible for making the energy sector both unreliable and extraordinarily expensive, to the point that energy prices, electricity prices, rose over the last decade by 56% over the rate of inflation. So it was a decoupling of electricity prices from the consumer price index, and it was entirely due to poor policy. And it was largely a function of Labor ideology and idiocy that saw that. Now we are starting to see prices coming down. We're seeing wholesale generation costs coming down substantially. Retail prices are coming down. I may say emissions from the electricity sector are also coming down. And, Mr Speaker, in terms of the National Energy Guarantee, the policy that we took to the party room last week has been improved following consultation. Well, it has been. It has been. We consult with our colleagues. We have improved it to ensure that there is effectively a mechanism that makes it absolutely clear that any change to emissions standards cannot put up prices. Now, that's a very important safeguard. But, Mr Speaker, overall, what Labor has failed to do is focus on price. That is what we're focusing on. We're having success with it, but there's more work to do. The announcements we made today, as recommended by the ACCC, will save families and businesses hundreds of dollars. They're long overdue. I thank the ACCC for their recommendations, which would never have arisen had it not been for the inquiry being commissioned by the Treasurer 15 months ago. It's a great piece of work. I'm glad that Labor is supporting or claiming to support at least one part of it, but this is an opportunity to make a really material difference to people's electricity bills and get them lower. That's what they want us to do for them, cheaper electricity.
The members for Shorten and Eden Monaro will cease interjecting or they won't remain in the chamber. The member for Chisholm has the call.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Foreign Affairs. Will the minister update the House on what the government is doing to keep Australia's economy internationally competitive and prosperous? What are the risks of pursuing alternative suggestions?
The Minister for Foreign Affairs.
Thank you, Mr Speaker, and I thank the member for Chisholm for her question and for her support for businesses in her electorate. Mr Speaker, the Australian economy is growing at 3.1%. This is faster than all of the G7 nations, the largest, most advanced economies in the world. But this growth can't be taken for granted because Australia has to compete on the world stage. Our companies have to compete in the international marketplace. That's why the coalition government has an economic plan to keep our economy strong, growing and resilient and competitive. That's why we have provided tax relief for businesses and employers, while we're putting downward pressure on electricity prices, while we're finding new markets for our goods and services, and while we're ensuring that Australia is still an attractive destination for foreign investment. And our plan is working. In the 12 months to last July, over 300,000 more Australians are in work, and we are creating over 1,000 new jobs a day. So it is working, but we have to ensure that we remain an attractive destination for foreign direct investment, because data released last week by the Australian Bureau of Statistics shows that 1 in 10 Australian jobs is supported by foreign direct investment. Now, let me give you an example. Today I met with the CEO of Japan's Inpex Corporation, Mr Oeda, and they are developing one of the largest LNG projects in the world in Australia. It is the largest Japanese investment outside of Japan ever, and this will have enormous ramifications across the economy. Already they're employing directly 11,000 Australians. There are over 1,000 businesses engaged in this just one project, and already $16 billion has been generated for the local economy. Over the life of this one project, it is estimated that there will be $73 billion in tax revenue generated. So, Mr Speaker, that's what the coalition government's policies are aimed at, developing more foreign investment. And I'm asked about alternative approaches. Well, the Labor Party's policies are anti-investment, anti-economic growth, anti-jobs. The Labor Party believes in higher taxes and higher prices. They are so against business that it is having a deadening effect. The mere thought of a Labor-led government would have a deadening effect on investment. So the coalition stands for jobs, for workers, for investment. Labor stands for higher prices, higher taxes, lower investment, less jobs. We are fighting for the Australian worker.
The Minister's time has concluded. Just before I call the member for Batman, I'd just like to inform the House we've just had join us on the floor this afternoon a parliamentary delegation of members of the New Zealand Social Services and Community Committee. On behalf of the House, I extend a very warm welcome to you. The member for Batman.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the current Prime Minister. Can the Prime Minister confirm that he's had 5 different signature energy policies, including 2 just today? He's planning on dumping his signature big business handout, and his government is completely paralysed by infighting and chaos. Isn't it the case that Australians are paying the price for the circus that this government and its policies have become?
The Minister for the Environment and Energy.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I thank the member for Batman for a question. And she should have welcomed today's announcements because they will lower power prices, Mr Speaker. They will lower power prices. The ACCC is a cop on the beat. It conducted a 15-month inquiry. It was able to compel some 50,000 documents from the companies and shine a light on their behaviour. And as a result, there were 56 recommendations. And today we are announcing important ones that have been welcomed by ACCI, representing businesses across the country, including in her electorate, been welcomed by the National Seniors Group, Mr Speaker, representing many people who, for them, are struggling with their power bills. We're on the side of the consumer. You're on the side of the big power companies, Mr Speaker. You're on the side of the big power companies. Now, the member for Batman is a former union leader, probably like most on the other side, Mr Speaker. Do you think the member for Batman would listen to the words of the CFMEU president who wrote about Labor's 50% target? An increased renewable energy target of 50% by 2030 will increase the cost of electricity for manufacturing and ordinary households while being a poor tool to reduce Australia's overall global warming emissions. Did you hear that, Mr Speaker? The union movement are telling the member for Batman, stop all the worry about emissions and think about people's power prices. What about Ben Davis, the Victorian Secretary of the AWU, the former member for Maribyrnong's former secretary? What did they have to say? And I quote, "The rush away from coal and gas-fired electricity power stations to renewables is a little unseemly in its haste because we are potentially crucifying hundreds of thousands of manufacturing workers." Well, Mr Speaker, there is one member of those opposite who is actually a conscientious objector. One member. She's got her head down, Mr Speaker. Who do you think it was? Who do you think it was, Mr Speaker? It's the member for Paterson, Mr Speaker. The member for Paterson. Why? Because the member for Paterson is the daughter of a coal miner who holds an electorate in New South Wales Hunter. And I quote, she told the Australian she would support the construction of a new coal-fired power station. Hey, Mr Speaker, come on over to the member for Paterson. At the end of the day, we know what's going on over there. The Leader of the Opposition has sold out the workers he pretends to represent. He has done a deal with the Greens to protect his left flank. He is not supporting the workers, the blue-collar workers, the jobs of Australians that depend on cost-effective energy policies. Only the Coalition will deliver lower power prices.
Has concluded. Just before I call on the next question, I just want to address the House on that last question. I listened to the member for Batman, and her question at the very beginning had an inclusion or a lead-in with respect to the question to the Prime Minister. I'm just going to make really clear, having reflected through the answer, that I'm not going to allow that course to occur. If members are incapable of simply asking a question to the Prime Minister or Minister without adding in any other words, I'm going to sit them down, and I won't be offering a chance to rephrase the question. The member for Cowper has the call.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Defence Industry. Will the minister update the House on the success of the government's defence export strategy? How is that strategy assisting Australian businesses and the broader economy, and how does the strategy differ from the approach by previous governments?
The Minister for Defence Industry has
Thank you, Mr Speaker, and I thank the member for Cowper for his question. I must admit I'm sorry to hear that he's retiring from this House at the next election. He's done a marvellous job representing the people of North New South Wales for about the last 17 or so years. Mr Speaker, he asks me about the alternative to the government's defence export strategy, and I have to tell him that there simply isn't an alternative to the government's defence export strategy. When Labor was in power, they didn't even conceive of a defence export strategy. They didn't have a defence industry policy strategy. They didn't have any plans for naval shipbuilding in this country. They hadn't commissioned one ship to be built in Australia. They didn't do anything to initiate the Joint Strike Fighter program. They certainly didn't support the Combat Reconnaissance Vehicle program or the Australian industry content in it, Mr Speaker. When Labor was in power, spending on defence fell to 1.56% of GDP, the lowest since 1938, the last year of appeasement. So they didn't have any alternative to our defence export strategy. Quite the opposite, Mr Speaker. They were content to have a foreign military sales strategy where they bought everything from overseas, creating no jobs in this country, no highly sophisticated jobs in engineering or science or technology or maths, or the 60% of jobs in naval shipbuilding, for example, who are tradespeople. By contrast, Mr Speaker, the Turnbull government initiated a defence export strategy which we released in January of this year. A defence exports advocate, a defence exports office, a grants program for small and medium enterprises to support defence exports, and I can tell the member for Cowper and the House that it is working. In the June quarter of this year, applications for defence export permits jumped 25% on the same period in 2017, an enormous increase in companies having the confidence to apply for defence export permits to get their goods and services overseas, Mr Speaker. I can also tell you that since the beginning of January this year, the value of defence export permits granted has hit $1 billion in 6 months, Mr Speaker. $1 billion in 6 months of defence export permits that have been granted. So Australian businesses, small and medium enterprises, those who support the primes, are taking the clarion call from the government and investing in their businesses, trying to break into new markets, creating jobs, growing the economy, innovation and investment in infrastructure in this country, which is the hallmark of the Turnbull government, focusing on the economy, focusing on jobs, focusing on increasing wages and infrastructure in our economy.
The member for Port Adelaide.
Well, thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Prime Minister. The Prime Minister has said today that he won't be introducing legislation on his energy policy until he's confident it can pass the House. Does that legislation exist?
The Prime Minister has the call. Does. The member for Swan.
Mr Speaker, my question is to the Minister for Home Affairs. Will the Minister update the House on the benefits of Australia's strong—
Members on my left, member for Grindler. Yeah, it's getting a bit juvenile. The member for Swan has the call.
Mr Speaker, my question is to the Minister for Home Affairs. Will the Minister update the House on the benefits of Australia's strong and consistent border protection measures? Is the Minister aware of any threats to the integrity of Australia's borders?
Good question. The Minister for Immigration and Home Affairs.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker. I thank the honourable member for
on my left.
His question. I know he is very proud to be part of a government that has secured our borders, Mr Speaker, when Labor could never do it. When Labor came into office in 2007, there were 4 people in detention, including no children. So what did they do? They undid the policy of John Howard that had stopped the boats. What happened, Mr Speaker? 50,000 people came on 800 boats and 1,200 people drowned at sea. The Labor Party set up Madison Nauru. They put thousands of people onto the islands. They put 8,000 children into detention. And we have cleaned that mess up, Mr Speaker. We've closed the 17 detention centres. We've got every one of those children out of detention, and I have not had a death at sea on my watch. Now, would the Labor Party think to themselves, why don't we just reinvent the whole thing again? Why don't we go back and make the same mistakes we did in 2007? Of course they have, Mr Speaker. Of course they have. We saw during the break the Leader of the Opposition being interviewed, and it was a very interesting interview on ABC Radio where he was asked about regional resettlement options. That is, where would the people go from Madison Nauru that he had put on the island? Bearing in mind, Mr Speaker, that we have got over 1,000 people off, including over 300 people to the United States in that deal that we brokered. And he said, when he was asked about what countries he had in mind, Mr Shorten had said there was a range of countries within Asia and the Asia-Pacific we could talk to. The interview went on. He was asked to nominate specific countries, and Mr Shorten initially said, and I quote, "Well, I think there's big economies right through the Asian continent, who would, I think, worthwhile for us to talk to. What did he nominate? Canada. Canada. You know that great, well-known Southeast Asian country, Canada. Taking inspiration from the member for Sydney on geography. Now, the trouble is Canada's not taking people from Madison Nauru. He went on to nominate New Zealand. We've already established if you send people to New Zealand, the boats restart. He nominated Taiwan and Korea. You know, some of these countries take less than 10 people a year through their migration program. What it demonstrates, Mr Speaker, is that Labor once again is making policy on the run when it comes to border protection. There is no question, Mr Speaker, that the Labor Party would continue to make the mistakes of old if they were elected again, Mr Speaker. The reality is, all Australians realise that Labor have no capacity to secure our borders. They don't have the strength to stare down people smugglers, and everybody knows you cannot trust a word that this Leader of the Opposition utters.
The Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Prime Minister. Will the Prime Minister today release the legislation that he referred to in his last answer?
The Prime Minister has the call.
Right. Thank you, Mr Speaker. The government will introduce the legislation when it is concluded that it has the support in the House of Representatives for it to be passed.
The member for North Sydney has the call.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Small and Family Business, the Workplace and Deregulation. Will the Minister update the House on how the government's economic policies are benefiting small and family businesses? How would different approaches hurt families and businesses?
The Minister for Small and Family Business.
Thank you, Mr Speaker, and I thank the member for North Sydney for his question. And I note that recently I was in his electorate in Chatswood, in a room full of small and family business operators, listening to their concerns and receiving their feedback and thanks for the fact that the Turnbull Coalition government places this most important of sectors, small and family business, responsible for employing up to 60% of the private sector in this economy at the centre of everything that it does. Unlike those opposite, Mr Speaker. I note that on the last day before winter recess, the Leader of the Opposition made the member for McMahon the shadow Minister for Small and Family Businesses, and just the very next day the Leader of the Opposition and the shadow Treasurer announced that under a Turnbull, a Shorten Labor government, if elected, they would let tax rates be 10% higher than has already been legislated under the enterprise tax plan. Tax rates in this country for small and family businesses are on their way to 25%. If those elected opposite, they would be stuck at 27.5%, some 10% higher. But it's not just tax policy, Mr Speaker, that is the Leader of the Opposition's centrepiece of war against this most vital sector. It is whether it's higher taxes, whether it's higher power prices, whether it's, as I spoke about last week, the abolition of the Building and Construction Commission, looking after some 367,000 small and family businesses operating in the construction sector. What do those opposite want to do, Mr Speaker, the Leader of the Opposition? Because of his secret deal with the CFMU, they want to take the cop off the beat. They want to bring back the Road Safety Remuneration Tribunal, putting some 39,000 small and family business transport operators out of work immediately. In the last 12 months of the Rudd-Gillard-Rudd debacle, we had Labor policies that were responsible for 61,000 small and family businesses in this country disappearing. Some 520,000 jobs in small and family business land in the 6 years under Labor, when last in power, disappeared. In the last 12 months under the Turnbull Coalition government and their sensible economic management, we have had a net increase of the number of small and family business operating of 65,000 people, an increase in the employment in this sector of 66,000 people alone, just in small business land. Mr Speaker, the small and family business operators in this country can be very clear of one thing. Whether it's the Leader of the Opposition or the Shadow Minister for Small and Family Business, who is the Shadow Treasurer, with friends like them, they don't need enemies.
The Leader of the Opposition.
my questions to the Prime Minister. I refer to the Prime Minister's last answer. Is the Prime Minister's position that the Parliament will only be allowed to see the legislation if we agree to vote for it before we've seen it?
The Prime Minister has the floor.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I explained the circumstances in my press conference this morning. It's perfectly straightforward. We have a majority of one in this House. We need to have all or almost all of our party room to support legislation for the government to carry it on its own numbers. With respect to this matter, we're not in that position at this stage. We continue talking to our colleagues.
The member for Murray.
Thank you, Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Agriculture and Water Resources. Will the Minister update the House on how the government's drought assistance measures are supporting primary producers and farming communities to build drought resilience and preparedness, including in my electorate of Murray? What are the alternatives to supporting our primary producers in this way?
The Minister for Agriculture.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker, and can I thank the honourable member for his question and his concern about the spread of this insidious drought across this country. This government's policy on drought has been one around farmer welfare and preparedness. And proudly, we've invested over $1.8 billion in farming families and communities. And yesterday we announced more measures, but we're making sure that we're lifting the farm household assistance to $37,626 to those farming families out there. We've invested a further $25 million into rural financial counselling services. $8.4 million of that will go towards new boots in the ground, to put people, farming families in front of rural financial counsellors at their kitchen table, an important measure to give them time to make strategic decisions about their business and about their future. But we've gone further than that. Now we're looking at preparedness measures. Nearly $100 million in water infrastructure projects. $23.7 million of that will go towards the Great Artesian Basin program, a great program that goes towards capping and piping bores and looking after one of this nation's greatest natural resources. Nearly $72 million in identifying new water projects, new dams. We're proud to say that we want to build more dams to build resilience for the agricultural sector and productivity and profitability for the agricultural sector. Making sure that we invest also in giving over $2.7 million to the Bureau of Meteorology to help them have more localised climate programs that allow farmers to make strategic decisions about when they should buy cattle, when they should sell cattle, giving them the tools to get through droughts, to be prepared for droughts, but also making a strategic investment, an instant write-off in any fodder infrastructure that farmers want to build to be able to get through droughts into the future. This is a strategic decision in their future. We've increased the amounts of loans for the Regional Investment Corporation from $1 million to $2 million to give more competitive pressure in the financial sector to the agricultural farmers right across this country. This is about building greater resilience into the agricultural sector. But we've also announced Major General Stephen Day to coordinate our approach and the whole nation's approach to this. This is ensuring that we actually hear as a government on a daily basis about the concerns and the rapid response that we will need to give as this continues to evolve. But the story of agriculture is still a good one. There will be further droughts. Farmers in this country should be loud and proud about what they do and how they do it. This drought will go, and when it does, they will make a quid. They will make a quid, and we should be proud of what they do for this economy. And I can say to each and every farmer that this government, this parliament, will stand shoulder to shoulder with you to get you through this drought.
The Manager of Opposition Business.
Thanks, Speaker. My question is to the Prime Minister, and I refer to the Prime Minister's previous answer. If the condition for any legislation being introduced is that no member of the coalition will cross the floor, doesn't that mean now that each member of the coalition backbench has a right of veto over whether or not this legislation will ever be introduced?
Hear, hear. The Prime Minister has the call.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. The honourable member did not accurately reflect the answer that I gave, but the fact is, as I've said this morning and I said earlier, we seek to ensure that legislation that we introduce has the support of sufficient of our party room to enable it to be carried on our own numbers.
The member for Flynn has the call.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question is to the Minister of Regional Development, Territories and Local Government. Will the Minister update the House on how the government is building on our strong track record of supporting rural communities who are doing it tough? What are the alternatives to providing this support?
The Minister for Regional Development has the call.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the member for Flynn for his question, because he, like those on this side of the House, understands the importance of backing regional communities, regional jobs, developing regional economies and, of course, dealing with the challenges of drought in particular across their communities at the moment. Now, yesterday, Mr. Speaker, I joined the Prime Minister, the Deputy Prime Minister, the Minister for Agriculture in Forbes and Parks to announce the second phase, the next phase of our drought package, a package that now reaches $1.8 billion of assistance across rural and regional communities affected by drought. Now, part of this phase is a $75 million extension to the Stronger Communities program. That is all about delivering immediate support to the worst affected drought communities through their local governments, through their local councils. Initial support of $1 million will be rolled out to 60 councils in Queensland and New South Wales and 2 in Victoria, Mr. Speaker, because councils need to support those communities. The drought is certainly being felt very hard on the farm. It's being felt equally hard in town, and that's what this Drought Communities program is all about. I'm focused on ensuring that councils have the flexibility to prioritise projects in their local communities that will get that economic activity happening. Local leaders making local decisions, employing tradies, employing local job seekers, local subcontractors for local infrastructure projects, community events in tough drought times, and of course events and activities that will support particularly water for potable use, water for stock use, you name it, that local communities determine are drought necessities in these times of challenge. Now, under this program, we've already delivered just on 124 projects across 23 councils previously in what has been a $35 million program to date. Obviously, the $75 million we announced yesterday will boost regional economic activity in drought-affected communities quite significantly. In Narrabeen, in Blackall, in Forbes, in Charleville, Moree, proud farming and grazing communities that the Turnbull government is behind and has been supporting. As the Minister for Agriculture said, they do not want pity. They want sensible support to help them get through the tough times such that they can return to leading the charge in supplying significant opportunity and wealth for our national economy from their regional communities. So I say to those across the chamber, make sure you get behind regional communities such as we are. Make sure you acknowledge the importance of the Drought Communities program, because it's as tough in town as it is on the farm.
The Leader of the Opposition.
My question is to the Prime Minister. Given his last answer, can the Prime Minister confirm that he is unwilling to talk to Labor about energy price legislation until he has the consent of the member for Warringah?
Here. Members on both sides. Members on both. The Prime Minister.
For his question, his invitation to engage in his bipartisanship is not very persuasive. The honourable member will understand. The honourable member will understand that when dealing with issues of this kind, I'll continue to confer with my colleagues.
The member for Fisher.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Human Services. Will the minister update the House on how the government is supporting farmers in drought-affected Australia by guaranteeing essential services and making access to financial support quicker and simpler? Is the minister aware of different approaches to managing the economy that would hurt our farming communities?
The Minister for Human Services.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and can I thank the member for Fisher for that question. Now, members of this House know that we are living through one of the worst droughts on record, and that's why this government has announced the measures that we need to assist those Australians in need. the measures that the Minister for Agriculture has just been going through, which show that we stand shoulder to shoulder with our fellow Australians to give them the assistance they need to survive this severe drought and that we know has affected so many. Now, in response to that, we've increased our direct assistance and concessional loans to $1.8 billion as part of the next phase of our drought package. And yesterday, the government announced further measures to assist our farmers, including additional funding for local infrastructure in drought-affected areas, new tax breaks for farmers, the appointment of a national drought coordinator and low-interest loans. Now, we've already in 2014 introduced the Farm Household Allowance, which supports our farmers who are doing it tough. The recently announced package provides immediate relief and also includes additional support for mental health services and community organisations. We're providing lump sum payments in addition to regular fortnightly payments worth up to $12,000 for eligible farming households from September this year. And, Mr Speaker, we know on this side of the House that this assistance that we've announced is urgent. We need to give farmers quick and easy access to payments and support, and we've taken action to make sure that that's the case. Within my department, we have doubled the number of staff who are working on farm household allowance claims. This means that people can call up, they can talk to someone who's knowledgeable and who can assist them to make sure that their claim can be processed in as quickly and as expeditious way as possible. We've also introduced staff-assisted claiming for farmers. That means if they can't complete their claim online, they can call us and talk to a knowledgeable person who can work through the claim process with them, and they can get assistance from this specialised staff member. We're also taking immediate action to streamline the process. So we request less information from people, and we will be able to use existing information to help them fill out their forms. For example, we could take the balance sheet from their farm or else a tax return and use this as a source of information. Mr Speaker, we're also providing that the people who can assist with drought assistance are going out directly into drought-affected communities on our drought assistance buses, particularly into regional New South Wales and into Queensland. And as this drought evolves, so will our policy response. Now, Mr Speaker, the danger for this, we can only do this, of course, if we're running a strong economy. We can only do this because we've made the right decisions to make sure that Australians have opportunities that they need, and that means that we're able to use the dividend from that process to assist Australians who are in need. And of course, we're the only people in this chamber that have policies that grow the Australian economy.
The Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Prime Minister. I refer to the Prime Minister's answer in which he said that his government would not introduce legislation unless it could be carried on its own numbers. Given that the Prime Minister has a majority of 1, doesn't every member of his backbench, including the former Prime Minister, now have the same power over government policy as the Prime Minister himself?
The Prime Minister has the call.
Well, I thank the honourable member for his question, Mr Speaker. Mr Speaker, it's self-evident that in a Parliament or House of Representatives with a government with a majority of 1, individual members who choose not to vote in accordance with the decisions of the majority of the party room have the ability to prevent legislation being carried, and that is the reality. That is the practical reality of the situation, and that is why since the party meeting last week we've been engaging with members to discuss their concerns and ensure that we can deliver the support for the government's policies on the floor of the House.
The member for New England.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Trade, Tourism and Investment. Can the Minister update the House on how the government is supporting our farmers, especially by creating new opportunities in global markets?
The Minister for Trade and Investment.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker. And I thank the member for New England for his question, because we on this side of the House are absolutely committed to continuing to open new market export opportunities for Australian farmers and Australian businesses. And in fact, it's been a coalition that has delivered the world's best market access for Australian farmers through the landmark free trade agreements. It's the deals that we've done with China, Japan, Korea, Singapore, Peru, and it's the deals that we also have underway with Indonesia, with Hong Kong, with the Pacific Alliance countries of Colombia, Mexico, Chile and Peru, as well as the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership. All of this a full agenda to ensure that Australian farmers can reap the benefits of prosperity as a direct result of being able to export quality Australian produce to the world. And in fact, that's recognised throughout Australia's regional and rural communities. The President of the National Farmers Federation, Fiona Simpson, says, and I quote her, "Trade is good for our farmers, our regional communities and the national economy as a whole." So the simple fact is, as the member for New England knows, and as everyone on this side of the House knows, we sat idle for a long time while Labor was in power and Labor was unable to deliver any trade agreements. And it wasn't until the coalition was elected that we started opening up market opportunities all around the world. Market opportunities that now Australian farmers are reaping the rewards of. Market opportunities that are seeing investment into Australian regional communities. And market opportunities, Mr Speaker, that most importantly are delivering jobs to Australians. That's what matters to the Australian people, and that's the reason why the Coalition is so steadfastly committed to making sure we open those opportunities. Now, if you want to see a point of contrast, Mr Speaker, a point of contrast between us and the Australian Labor Party, look no further than the TPP-11. Because on the TPP-11, this Leader of the Opposition wanted to walk away, put his tail between his legs and walk away from a major trade agreement that is giving Australian farmers and Australian business access to $13.7 trillion of global economic activity. Point that contrast, Mr Speaker, to what the Coalition did. We followed it through, despite the fact that the Labor Party said it was a vanity project. We followed it through and we delivered it. And we delivered it because this is the side of the House that delivers good, sound policy, market access, jobs for Australians, new investment into the Australian economy, and ensures that Australia continues to have a more prosperous future.
The Leader of the Opposition.
My question is to the Prime Minister. Given that the Prime Minister has previously advised the parliament that no legislation to lower energy prices will proceed to the parliament unless all 76 members of the government and the House of Representatives agree, why do Australians have to wait to get lower power prices because of the disunity in the Prime Minister's government?
The Prime Minister has to call. The Minister
the honourable
will
member
cease
for his
interjecting.
question. And Mr Speaker, he's not even capable of remembering what I said for 5 minutes between my answer and his question. Mr Speaker,
Members on my left.
Speaker, it is clear. We have a majority of one in this House and we are in a minority in the Senate. But yet, despite many people questioning whether we would be able to deliver in this parliament, we have delivered one massive reform after another. The largest personal income tax cuts in 20 years. We've delivered lower taxes for small and medium family businesses. We've delivered childcare reform. We've delivered schools funding reform. We've delivered billions of dollars going into Medicare and health and the PBS. We've got record spending on infrastructure. And, Mr Speaker, we've been able to do what the Leader of the Opposition said would be unthinkable. We actually stood up for Australian workers and we got the Trans-Pacific Partnership agreed. Mr Speaker, our government, my government, has delivered one big reform after another again and again. It's been said that we could not get legislation through the Senate. Again, it's been said that we had a small minority in the House. And of course, Mr Speaker, the numbers are what they are. But we have delivered, and the runs are on the board, and they are record jobs growth last year, 3.1% GDP growth, energy prices starting to turn in the right direction, downwards, and, Mr Speaker, tax cuts for hard-working middle-income Australians this year voted against by the Labor Party.
The member for Fairfax.
Thank you, Mr Speaker, and my question is to the Minister for Veteran Affairs. Will the minister update the House on the government's response to yesterday's commemoration to the Battle of Long Tan?
The Minister for Veterans Affairs.
Well, thank you, Mr Speaker. And I do thank the member for Fairfax for his question. I appreciate his interest in veterans in his community, but also in the current serving personnel. It's greatly appreciated. And he understands, as I know all members understand, the importance of looking after our service men and women. Recently I had the privilege to be in Kabul and Baghdad and met many extraordinary Australians who are serving in those countries on our behalf. I must say, the thing that strikes me when I do meet with our service men and women is, although they're extraordinarily well trained, extraordinarily capable, passionate about the role they do, they're not supermen, they're not superwomen. They can bleed, they can get broken bones, and from time to time their mental health can suffer as well. And it's our obligation as a grateful nation, to make sure we care and support for them and provide support for them on their return. And, Mr Speaker, I must say that every time I do get the chance to speak in front of our serving personnel and our veterans, I start with one very simple point. Thank you for your service. Thank you for your service, and thank your families for your service. And on the weekend we commemorated Long Tan Day, or Vietnam Veterans Day, and it was a very important commemorative event here in Canberra, where we reflected on the 60,000 Australians who served in Vietnam. Tragically, Mr Speaker, 521 people died, 521 Australians died in the Vietnam War. 3,000 were wounded, and thousands more carried the psychological scars with them for the rest of their lives. And there is no greater service to our nation than to put on the uniform of the Navy, the Army or the Air Force and be prepared to place yourself in harm's way to help those who perhaps can't help themselves. So we as a nation, I believe, and I'm sure there's a sentiment shared across the chamber, we as a nation are greatly indebted to those who are prepared to serve and put on that uniform. So MPs, I think we notice every day as we travel throughout our communities, whether it's in our community halls, in schools or amongst the memorials, the names of the fallen. We see them as we move throughout our community. And it's important that we honour them with the way we choose to live our lives today. Their values of mateship, of resilience, of integrity, courage in adversity, that culture of service above self is something that I think we can all take with us in the roles that we fulfil in this place. I'd suggest that perhaps we can all learn from that great Anzac tradition as we do our role as members of Parliament. So I say to those Vietnam veterans, I say to those families who supported them through those very difficult years after their service, thank you for your service. This House is united in recognising you, particularly on Vietnam Veterans Day, lest we forget.
The member for Kingston on indulgence.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. And just on indulgence, I'd like to associate the opposition of the words of the minister. I know that many members of parliament went to local services around the country and reflected on the weekend that service and sacrifice, and it is very fitting that we recognise that in the House today and also recognise those families. I had the honour of listening to Keith Payne, VC, on Saturday night, and him talking not only about his contribution but his family's contribution as well. And I think that's important we remember that as well, lest we forget.
The Prime Minister.
Mr Speaker, I ask that further questions be placed on the notice paper.
Thank the Prime Minister. The